One of the biggest complaints console players have with their controllers is reliability. Stick drift is probably one of the most common grievances that I've seen in the comments about my controller reviews. To combat that, Thrustmaster has developed a unique way of dealing with misbehaving thumbsticks by making the sticks a replaceable module on its Eswap controller. And we get our hands on the latest iteration. This is the Eswap S from Thrustmaster, which is a little bit more affordable, but also a little bit more simplified. So let's dive in and check it out. Hey everyone, I'm Jordan with 9 to 5 Toys. We are checking out the Thrustmaster Eswap S today. Now, as mentioned, this is not Thrustmaster's first attempt at doing this. You can see basically what the biggest feature is here, that these little modules are replaceable. But this is the latest iteration, so Thrustmaster's taken what it's learned from previous models and put it into this one. Some of the most significant changes from the previous, but still available Eswap X are a new non-interchangeable D-pad, which features tactile switches, updated buttons on the back, and an overall tweaked design. But otherwise, in its most basic form, the Thrustmaster Eswap S is a wired controller with some extra functionality, both with button mapping and with extra buttons to make competitive gaming a little bit easier. Taking a look at the design, on the face of the Thrustmaster Eswap controller are all of the buttons you would expect, plus a few more. In addition to the view, menu, and share buttons, there is a map button as well as a profile swap button. And 3 small LED lights help to identify the currently selected profile. The overall footprint is much wider than the standard Xbox, this is the Series X controller. It's more in line kind of like the Razer V2 Chroma with its overall width. But as you can see here, the handles on the Thrustmaster are maybe a little bit thinner, but then also a little bit longer as well. So with those thinner handles here, your fingers kind of wrap around it a little bit more and kind of get a little bit closer than what they do on some of the other controllers. But still through this, I found it to be comfortable for longer gaming sessions. And talking about the grips, they are slightly textured, but they keep their kind of plastic feel. Now, I didn't experience any trouble holding onto the controller, but extra sweaty players might prefer a grippier controller like the Scuff Instinct Pro, something that has rubber on the grips instead of this textured plastic. And moving on, obviously one of the most prominent features here and what the controller is even named after are these kind of swappable stick modules. So stick drift can be a big issue with a lot of different controllers. Like I said, I've seen a lot of comments on controller reviews where people are complaining about stick drift showing up, way too quickly. So what Thrustmaster did to kind of combat that is to make it so you can just replace the little stick module instead of replacing your entire controller. So, rather than just like fixing the issue, they made it easier to, replace it or replace a part of it. These modules are $20 a piece. And as you can see here, they have a magnetic connection. It's really easy to pull them in and out. Easy enough that my 4-year-old son, quickly discovered after trying the controller that those come out very easily. He's like, "Dad, what does this do?" So they're very easy to take out and remove. Now the sticks are rated up to 2 million activations, so Thrustmaster still thinks that these are going to last for quite a while, and I haven't had any issues with them and using this controller for a couple weeks, not a super long time, so might have to do a follow-up and see how long they last when I start experiencing some really intense stick drift. But they seem to be rated for a long life, and then also are easily replaceable. From looking at the website, there are 2 different sticks available, but so far, in use, they actually feel really good for playing FPS games and racing games. Mainly I play like Destiny 2 and Forza Horizon 5. Those are the 2 main titles. Occasionally some Warzone or Battlefield on my Xbox, but those are the main titles that I play, and this controller has felt really good for all of those. The face and D-pad buttons have a great tactile feel and sound to them. Thrustmaster calls these their tact switches, and with an actuation distance of 0.5 millimeters, they are quick to actuate and just really feel great to use. And here we'll kind of click around on it so you can hear how they sound. Here are the face buttons and the D-pad. So on the Eswap X, the D-pad is replaceable and swappable. You can even swap the positions of the thumbstick and the D-pad if you wanted to. But on this one, the S, it is fixed in that position, but then they've upgraded the switches a little bit for a little bit better sound and feel. Then here, we'll kind of play around with the rest of the controller so you can get an idea for the rest of it, what it sounds like. Here, we'll play with the thumbsticks. And we will hit the bumpers and the triggers. And these buttons on the back here as well. So That gives you a good idea of what it sounds like. I'd say the only thing that doesn't feel really, top tier are the bumpers. They feel a little bit loose, a little plasticky, a little mushy. That can maybe be tightened up a little bit, but otherwise all the face buttons, the triggers, and the back buttons, I think they all feel really good. And talking about those back buttons, these have been updated a little bit from the older Eswap X. Eswap X had, I think, 4 little round buttons back here. These are a little bit larger, but then there are only 2 of them, so you have the 2 little paddles back there. And the way that my hands grip this controller, they sit like right at the edge of my fingertips, of my middle finger, so it's actually like the perfect position for me to easily reach them, but I'm also not resting my finger on them constantly, so there aren't a lot of misclicks. That's something that took me a long time to get used to with the Elite controller, with your fingers actually resting on top of the paddles, and they're pretty easy to actuate. I would accidentally hit some buttons sometimes. Now I feel like I've gotten used to it and I don't do it. But with the position on this, it feels like they are in a very optimal position for me, where they just sit right at the edge there. It's really easy for me to find and push them if I need to, but then also miss them if I don't want to hit them. And that's in contrast to something like the Wolverine V2 Chroma from Razer, which has 4 buttons on the back here, but the way they're positioned, it just is not in the easy reach for my fingers. It felt like I really had to work to get to them. And you can watch the full review of this controller up here. I'll post it in the corner if you want to check that out. And these are mappable, so you can set them up to be like any button on the controller that you want. The Eswap S also has adjustable triggers, so I'd say that the full trigger pull is just a couple millimeters shorter than what the standard Xbox Series X controller is, but then you can also shorten that even more with this little switch in the back. And it doesn't shorten it up to the same like hair trigger feel that you would get on the Scuf Instinct Pro, but they are definitely shorter than what the full distance is. And we mentioned mapping briefly, but the other main feature for this controller is the Thrustmaster X app. 2 profiles can be set and even exported. And among the options for customization are complete custom mapping from the D-pad, face buttons, bumpers, and back buttons. Saving the profiles will also transfer them between Xbox and PC for continuity, so you don't have to set them up at both gaming stations. At first glance, the UI isn't super easy to navigate, but once you actually start going through it, it starts to make sense and you get used to it. In the mini stick menu, there are adjustments for sensitivity and dead zones on each stick. These sticks seem to be pretty good so far and are by default set to 1% for dead zones, but I bumped it up to 3%, which didn't really affect my gameplay at all. The trigger sensitivity can also be adjusted, as well as the intensity of both the handle and trigger vibrations. So all in all, there are a lot of great customization options. The only additional thing I'd like to see in here is the addition of a stick swap option for those of us who play Southpaw. For those who have been burned by stick drift in the past, the Thrustmaster Eswap S might be the perfect solution to your controller woes. The additional modules are $20, but that's much better than having to replace the entire controller. Sure, it might just be a band-aid for a problem that is inevitable, but the rest of the controller is solid as well. And $130 might be pricey compared to some of the competition, even considering that like the standard Xbox Series X controller is wireless and only $60, but that price is still right in line with other competition like the Wolverine V2 Chroma from Razer. So not that outlandish to get a little more functionality built into this controller with the mappable buttons, but then also to have those swappable mini stick modules. Alright, and that's going to do it for our review of the Eswap S controller from Thrustmaster. Let us know what you think about it down in the comments below. If you're looking for some other videos to watch, I'll link to our massive Xbox controller roundup, as well as our most recent video. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. This is Jordan with 9to5 Toys.